Hello, everyone. My name is Raina Callier, and I'm here on behalf of the CU Boulder Classics Department to talk to you a little bit about Jupiter, the Roman god, in advance of the Boulder Philharmonic's performance of Mozart's Jupiter Symphony. So let's get started. What do the words jovial, the planet Jupiter, and Mozart's Final Symphony have in common with each other? They're all associated with this guy. This is Jupiter or Jove, the Roman god. To the Greeks, he was called Zeus. I apologize in advance. I'm going to be using the names interchangeably. And he was the king of the gods and ruler of the sky. So he was in charge of precipitation and weather. And you can see here, he's also got this lightning bolt in his hand. And the lightning and thunder were ways in which he would express his displeasure with humankind. So it might not be surprising to us that the supreme god in an agricultural society would be one who's connected with weather and precipitation. In fact, we can see here, this is from Hesiod's Works and Days. This is a Greek work from the 7th century BCE, and it talks about this link between Zeus and agriculture and the success of a society, and actually ties it back into the behavior of the people in that society. Hesiod says, "They who give straight judgments to strangers and to the men of the land and go not aside from what is just, their city flourishes and the people prosper in it." And the next sentence he says, "Neither famine nor disaster ever haunt men who do true justice, but lightheartedly they tend the fields which are all their care." At the end of that same paragraph, he says, "They flourish continually with good things and do not travel on ships, for the grain-giving earth bears them fruit." So if you do right by Zeus, he will do right by you, and he will allow your grain to grow the way that it should, and your city will prosper. The opposite, of course, is true if you do not behave correctly. We can see that in that second paragraph there. He's talking about those who practice violence and cruel deeds, far seeing Zeus, the son of Cronos, ordains a punishment. So I do want to talk a little bit about this term, son of Cronos, and who this Cronos guy is and why he's important for us understanding how Zeus got to be the king of the gods. So Kronos is the Greek name of Zeus's father. In Roman, to the Romans, he is Saturn, and you can see there the connection with the planets as well. And Kronos was of the race of gods who came before Zeus's generation, and they were called the Titans. And Kronos, as a Titan, didn't want to be overthrown by his successors, by his progeny. So as his children were born, he was eating them. And we see this really kind of grim representation here by Francisco Goya called Saturn Devouring His Son. Well, so Cronus's wife, Rhea, got tired of this, as anyone would. And when Zeus, her last born, was born, she gave Cronos a stone to swallow instead. So he swallowed the stone thinking it was his baby, and Rhea whisked Zeus off to be raised in secret. When he came to adulthood, he came back, he made his father vomit up his siblings, and then they went to war against each other. So this is the Titanomachy, and the Titanomachy means the fight against the Titans, and it's the Olympian gods like Zeus and his siblings versus Cronos's generation, the Titans. It's a really popular subject in ancient art, so it's kind of good to know what it is. But Zeus and his brothers and sisters are victorious, and a lot of that has to do with Zeus's power, with his thunder, with his lightning, with his strength. So these are things we have to keep in mind, right? Jupiter, Zeus, is really sort of defined by his physical power, and that is really that's something that when people think about like thunder and lightning, right, they're strong, they're intense, and these are things that Jupiter is as well. Now, Jupiter also has kind of a fraught relationship with humankind. So now that he's king of the gods, he's sort of in charge of watching over humankind, and things don't always go super well. So we have several instances of him punishing humankind for various transgressions. So the first punishment that we hear of in Hesiod is Pandora. Pandora is a woman who is created by the gods and who is sent down to humankind to release the evils on the earth, or in some versions of things, she herself is the evil that is now on the earth. We also have in Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is a later work by a Roman poet from the 1st century BCE. And he tells of a time, and this is what's in your picture here on the right. He tells of a time when Jupiter got really tired of all the nonsense that humans were doing, and so he decided to kill off the entire human race with a flood. Now, two people happen to survive, a man and a woman, and Jupiter goes ahead and lets them try to continue on the human race and rebuild the human race from there. If that sounds similar to the story in Genesis of the flood and Noah. It is very similar. The last thing I want to talk about are the hospitality tests. So hospitality was a really important concept to the ancients, and because of that, Zeus or Jupiter was seen as being sort of in charge of enforcing it. So Zeus used to disguise himself as a human being and go to people's houses and see if they would receive him hospitably. And if they didn't, they would be punished. If they did, they would be rewarded. So all of this is to say, Zeus is a very important god and certainly not one that we want to dishonor. Because of that, the ways that he is honored in the ancient world are full of splendor. They are grandiose. They are over the top. Here's a great example. This is the Temple of Zeus at Olympia. This is where the Olympic Games were founded. And you can see there actually on the left-hand side, that's a picture of me standing next to the one column that's still upright at this temple. And you can just see how huge it is. I mean, the scale is just, it's overwhelming, the scale. And then in the center there, I have a depiction, a representation, a recreation of what the temple would have looked like on the inside, and this huge, huge statue that was there, which unfortunately we don't have, but a huge statue that was made of ivory and gold in honor of Zeus. So this is on the Greek side of things. The Romans also honored Zeus in style. Here is a recreation of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, which means Jupiter best and greatest. And it was on the Capitoline Hill in Rome. The Capitoline Hill is a really, really important location. It's the center for the most important religious and political events and monuments and things. And I have here also a coin, and the image on the coin is a recreation of this temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Okay, so we have this supreme god. He is powerful. He's dangerous. He thunders. We need to honor him with splendor. How do we get then to jovial? So jovial is an adjective that means good-humored or merry. And interestingly, it's not actually about that mythological Zeus or Jupiter. It's from an astrological belief that those born under the sign of the planet Jupiter are good-humored or merry. So this is a later thing that came about, and it has more to do with astrology than it does with the ancient Greek and Roman religious practices. However, it has been very influential in how modern representations of Zeus or Jupiter look. So here is Zeus from Disney's Hercules, and you can see he's laughing. In that movie, he's like always laughing at his own jokes. So we get this idea of jovial being represented here in that more modern version of Zeus. But is there anywhere in the ancient texts and our ancient sources where we can see this sort of more lighthearted view of Zeus or Jupiter? The first thing that popped into my mind when I was thinking about this question was Homer's Iliad. So Homer's Iliad, an epic poem written in the 8th century BCE, mostly takes place on a battlefield at Troy. But there are a couple of scenes where Zeus is kind of lending a humorous aspect to things. So the first is where he laughs at the ridiculousness of the other gods, such as when Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, tries to interfere in the battle and gets wounded. Zeus thinks that's pretty funny. And then there are also some scenes with his wife Hera that have sort of a more lighthearted humor in them versus the otherwise very dark tone of the epic. So one example is at the end of book 1, Zeus and Hera have this little argument, but in the end, everything's fine and everybody's laughing and feasting. So really the argument doesn't matter too much. And then in book 14, Hera actually seduces her husband Zeus to get him to turn his attention away from the battlefield. And it's just kind of humorous seeing Zeus get tricked by his own wife, who knows very well about his proclivities. Speaking of which, another thing that Zeus is known for is his inability to resist his own passions. So he cheated on his wife Hera frequently with various humans and other gods. An example of some of the offspring of these dalliances includes Hermes the god, Apollo the god, as well as his sister Artemis, Helen of Troy, and even Hercules. This is just a very short list of a very long list of possibilities here. Now, we might not necessarily consider this funny from a modern perspective, but certainly there's an irony inherent in the fact that the supreme ruler of the gods, the most powerful of the gods, can't help but succumb to his desires. In fact, the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, which was written in the 7th century BCE, addresses this very thing. So Aphrodite is the goddess of love, and in this hymn, we see this discussion of the fact that even Zeus, the one who delights in the thunder, the one who is the very greatest and the one who has the very greatest honor as his share, even Zeus succumbs to Aphrodite. Even his well-formed wits are deceived by her whenever she wants, and she mates him with mortal women with the greatest of ease. So again, maybe from a modern perspective, all of this adultery and a lot of it is, non-consensual on the part of the person that Zeus is sleeping with, right? That's not funny to us from a modern perspective, certainly, but just the humor in this great supreme god being laid low by his own whims and desires. All right. Some other things that are, again, maybe more light-hearted parts of the stories of Zeus and Jupiter are the fact that he frequently turns himself into animals in order to gain access to the object of his desire. So here is Zeus with Ganymede, and Zeus is in the form of an eagle. We have Zeus with Leda, and Zeus is in the form of a swan. And then we have Zeus as a bull, and he's got Europa on his back. So that supreme god, the ruler of the gods, turning himself into a beast in order to get close to the object of his desire. There is certainly an irony and sort of lighthearted humor in that, especially to the ancients. Here are some of Jupiter's moons that are named after his lovers. Those are not the only ones, but probably the most well-known ones. And this kind of gets into maybe another aspect of Zeus as lighthearted, carefree. And that's because it turns out he never really gets any consequences for his actions. Whenever he cheats on his wife can't really do anything to hurt him for it. Rather, she will often go after the woman that he sleeps with, or she will go after the child that comes of the union between Zeus and these other goddesses and women. And of course, that's certainly not fair, but it gets at the heart of one of the things about Zeus, which is that, again, he's kind of seen as being carefree because he doesn't have any consequences for his actions. Now, this very much depends on which text you're reading. This particular quote comes from Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound, which was written in the 5th century BCE in Athens. And what's important about understanding the context of this quote is that Athens at the time was a democracy. So in this play, Zeus, as the king, the supreme ruler of the gods, who imposes his will through violence, is portrayed very negatively. Nonetheless, here is what Aeschylus has to say about him. Aeschylus says, "Everything is a heavy burden except that of being the ruler of heaven. No one is free of burdens, no one except Zeus." So it's good to be king, right? Okay, so to summarize, here are some things about Zeus, about Jupiter, that can kind of characterize him and make us think about what does it mean that Mozart's symphony is called the Jupiter Symphony. So he is supreme, he's the ruler, he's large, or there are things that are large that are associated with him, like the planet Jupiter, as well as his temples and statues. He's powerful and threatening, he thunders. He's awesome and deserving of honors. And also, perhaps, he occasionally has a playful or less serious side, or at the very least, especially in later years, we start to get that sort of indication from that word jovial, where we're associating good-natured and merriment with Zeus and with Jupiter, even if it came about from a different origin. All right, so how does this relate to Mozart? Mozart's Jupiter Symphony, which was nicknamed thus not by the composer himself, but by Johann Peter Salomon after Mozart's death. It's the longest of his symphonies. It's very grandiose, it's very complex, it's very powerful. It thunders sometimes. But I want you to think about when you're listening to it. Hopefully, you get to see the performance. And if you do, when you're listening, maybe think about this question of if there's a hint of the playful there too, if there's a hint of what we would consider joviality in it too. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. And I really hope that you enjoy the performance. Bye.